Hi, it's time for another verb of the day. Today's verb is I. Let's take a moment to look at some definitions or the ways that we use this particular verb. The first way you might hear I used is to mean to look at something. And a connected definition here would be the second one, to watch something closely or to watch something with great interest. I think I have encountered this verb sometimes as I have read various literature, different stories describing the way in which a character is looking at or watching someone or something quite closely. A third way the verb I gets used is to mean to contemplate or consider. So, with this, I would suggest you think about that particular phrase, to think about something rather deeply, contemplate. You should know that I is a regular verb. To make the progressive form of this verb, I want you to notice you don't drop the E before you add ing. And that's because here our letter Y is not making a consonant sound, it's part of the vowel sound. So the progressive form here is E-Y-E ing, and we pronounce it eyeing. The past tense and participle forms of this verb can be made by just adding the letter D, since this verb already ends in an E. Our base verb, I, is just a vowel sound, so our past tense ending is just going to make a D sound, and we're not adding an extra syllable as we say it. So it should sound like this: I'd, I'd. Okay. Now, there's one phrasal verb that we're going to discuss today, but it's generally connected to those that we've already talked about. So the phrasal verb you might encounter is to eye up. This can have a couple different meanings. One would be sort of to look over a person. And you might be doing it kind of to evaluate, form some sort of an opinion. Let's look at an example sentence. He eyed his competitors up as the introductions were made. So here, maybe we're thinking of an athlete and looking at the other athletes that are competing and thinking like, I'm maybe stronger, I'm better than this person, or they're considering, are they, as they make those assessments or that evaluation. A second way to use eye up is again this idea of looking at someone rather closely or with interest, but here the difference is maybe there's some romantic interest. So, an example sentence here: he's been eyeing you all night. So, you might imagine one friend telling their others, right? There's someone looking at you and trying to signal or indicate they're interested in maybe getting to know you a bit better, or perhaps a date in the future. Now, let's continue using our verb of the day, I, in a couple different verb tenses. Today, we're going to practice the present progressive and the present perfect progressive. Let's start with the present progressive. We use this verb tense to talk about actions that are in progress or that are happening right now. In some textbooks, you'll see this called the present continuous. It means the same thing as present progressive. I like saying present progressive with my students because we have two P's in the name of this verb tense, and I like to use that as a reminder to my students I need two parts to make the affirmative verb tense here. So I'm going to use a present form of be. That's my first part. So that's going to be am, is, or are, depending on my subject. And then I'm going to use that ing form of the verb. Let's take a look at an affirmative example here. The department is eyeing some big changes for the next fiscal year. So here, this might tie back to that considering, contemplating definition we spoke about earlier. So they're thinking about making some big changes. If I want to make a negative present progressive sentence, my structure will be to have my subject, then the form of be that matches, then not, then the ing form of the verb. Here's another example. They aren't eyeing the competition at this time. Right? So here, they're not looking at, they're not watching them closely. Um, It's not happening right now. Maybe you'd hear an announcer say that as they're kind of getting ready for a match or a game. We can also make yes or no questions in the present progressive. To do this, we start with our form of be, whichever form matches our subject, that subject comes next. Then we have the ing form the verb. Here's another example. Is that politician eyeing the White House? Now, we just made it through midterm elections in the United States, but people are already starting to talk about the 2024 elections, and particularly who is going to run for the office of president. So here, this might also be kind of the considering and contemplating definition here. Is this particular person thinking about running for this position? Now, let's continue talking about the present perfect progressive. Okay? Now, again, some books will call this the present perfect continuous. That's fine, means the same thing. But just like I mentioned before, two P's and two parts of the verb, the present perfect progressive has three P's and it's going to require three parts to make our verb. So I need to pay attention to my subject. And based on what my subject is, I will use either have or has. That's my first part. Then I use the participle been, B-E-E-N. And then I use the ing form of the verb. And I'm using the present progressive, present perfect progressive to talk about an action that started in the past and continues into the present. It's really common when someone really wants to emphasize how long an action has been ongoing. So let's take a look at an example sentence. Our team has been eyeing a rematch since the loss last month. Okay. Heard a coach say this recently. Um, and again, kind of the focus here is we've been thinking about, we've been kind of evaluating that competition since we lost to them, and with this idea of like we're going to play them again in the future. So this action of considering them has been ongoing. Now let's talk about making a negative present perfect progressive sentence. Our structure here, we'll have our subject, then have or has, then not, then our participle been, and then the ing form of the verb. Here's another example. Many families haven't been eyeing new houses since the latest interest rate increases. So right now in the United States, to have a mortgage or a home loan, it's generally more expensive than it was 3 months ago, 6 months ago, a year ago. So some families have stopped looking for or looking at potential new homes. Now let's take a look at yes or no questions. To do this, we start with have or has, whichever form matches our subject. Subject comes next. Then we have our participle been, and then the ing form of the verb. Here's another example. Have you been eyeing a new coat for the winter? So this phrase, sort of been eyeing, is used frequently as people are talking about shopping and perhaps buying or acquiring something new. So here someone might be asking, have you been looking at, have you been thinking about buying a new coat? Now let's spend a moment to talk about some words and phrases related to our verb I. And the first word we're going to talk about, of course, is the noun form of this word. So same spelling, same pronunciation. The noun I can have a number of different meanings. We're going to talk about 4 of them today. The first is to refer to the organ of sight, right? So hopefully, I know my picture tends to be quite small on these, but you can see what I'm pointing out, right? This is my organ of sight. I have 2 eyes. So you might hear somebody say, close your eyes and wait for the surprise, right? So they're referencing that. A second way you'll hear I used sometimes is to refer to the center of the flower. An example of this. This flower has a striking pink eye. Right? So we're talking about sort of what's in the center, not the petals that are out, but what's in the middle. Another way the noun I gets used is to refer to someone's opinion or their attitude towards something. So an example of this might be, in their eyes, your behavior was out of line. What we're saying is, in their opinion, the way you behaved was not good. It was not appropriate. A fourth way to use the noun I is to refer to the small hole that's in a needle in which you put thread in order to be able to sew. An example of this, pull the thread through the eye, right? So maybe we're teaching someone to sew and we're giving them this instruction. Another phrase you might encounter is to be all eyes. Right? So here, all eyes is a way to say fully attentive. You are paying a lot of attention, you're watching closely. An example of this, neighbors have been all eyes since the robberies started. Right? So more people are paying attention, being attentive, maybe to stop or reduce the amount that are occurring in their neighborhoods. Another phrase you might encounter is eye to eye. This is used to signal agreement, or, like in my example sentence, because it's negative, we're going to talk about disagreement. So, an example of this, we haven't seen eye to eye in ages. So, this is suggesting we haven't been in agreement in a really long time. The last phrase I'll leave you with today is in the public eye. Many times people use this phrase to note that something is well known or something is frequently seen. An example of this, she has been in the public eye since she was a child. This is true sometimes with child performers, be they actors or singers, or some other kind of talent. Um, they become well known, and sort of all of their actions are well known to other people around the world. Thanks so much for watching today's video. I hope you have a great day.